Very, very good. Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses that are here. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the Chinese threat, which we all know is real here in this country. I also think it's important that if you're talking about Chinese political warfare, that one of the prime threats that we have, as far as I'm concerned, is Donald Trump, who we know has a history of working with China on a variety of different, in my opinion, unethical and illegal matters. Now, briefly, Mr. Malinowski, has China funneled bribes and payments to leaders and heads of state as part of their foreign influence operation? Just briefly?
Yes.
And thank you. And these are exactly the kinds of threats that our founders had in mind when they wrote the Emoluments Foreign Interference Clause of our Constitution. Isn't that correct, Mr. Malinowski?
Absolutely, yes.
And let's be clear about the facts. The former president spent his time in office collecting payments from China and many other countries through his businesses. He refused to divest from these businesses and broke decades of precedent. Now, we all know that the Constitution has a specific prohibition from receiving payments from foreign governments. Our committee, this committee, actually had an investigation that documented cash flowing directly from the Chinese government's state-owned businesses into the businesses and pockets of the Trump family. Here is just some of that. We know that the People's Republic of China, including state-owned enterprises, sent more than $5.5 million to the Trump organization. And just to be clear, it's a minimum of $5.5 million because we only have data and a few of the Trump locations. It is likely much, much higher a number that China actually spent money and drove money into the Trump organization, of course, while Donald Trump was the president. This is unconstitutional and threatens our national security. Now, these, of course, aren't the only favors that the Trump family got from China. Just months after he took office, the Chinese government suddenly reversed long-standing policies and awarded Trump 38 new trademarks in China for industries related to restaurants and advertising. And of course, this went beyond just Donald Trump himself. In April of 2017, with Trump's White House in chaos, many people, including the Chinese government, were all trying to gain influence during this time. Ivanka Trump, who was working in the White House, got preliminary approval for 3 Chinese trademarks on the same day that Donald Trump had dinner with Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago. And remember, Ivanka never divested her company while she was working in the White House. Now, President Trump also overruled our own security officials in our own government and publicly promised to save jobs at a Chinese government telecom company which was facing sanctions. And the list goes on and on and on. I think we should all be very concerned that the President of the United States, at the time, Donald Trump, decided to actually let corporate criminals off the hook while he was claiming to fight for Chinese jobs. And you also don't have to take my word for it. John Bolton, who was Donald Trump's right-wing national security advisor, a strict conservative, wrote about Trump, and I'll quote, that he commingled the personal and the national, not just on trade questions, but across the whole field of national security. This is actually from the Washington Post. John Bolton even reported, John Bolton, the extreme right-wing former member of the administration, that Donald Trump told President Xi, and I quote, "Make sure I win," during a dinner at the G20 conference in Osaka, Japan. Now, Mr. Malinowski, if John Bolton's story is true as reported by the Washington Post, Donald Trump is literally inviting Chinese political warfare. Isn't that right?
Yes, and I have no reason to believe that John Bolton would be making any of this up. He would have no reason to do that.
I thank you, sir. I completely agree with you. The fact that John Bolton is essentially laying out that Donald Trump was inviting Chinese political warfare is shameful, and that should be investigated here as part of this committee. But we know the conflicts go on and on. Jared Kushner was paid $2 billion by Saudi Arabia just a few months after leaving office, after he and Trump pursued radical pro-Saudi policies during their time in the White House. And we know that the attacks on our democracy continue, not just in Trump's actions around China, but in the numerous other payments to other foreign governments that happened while Trump was in office, and that is happening now to the Kushner family post-White House. Now, we've all been working to investigate this conflict of interest for months, but the majority hasn't moved or joined us. This is unacceptable, and we should continue to demand answers. And with that, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes, I thought we were going to recognize, Mr. Burleson from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When China first opened its doors